Hey guys, Jabadoo here. So I just wanted to create a video on how to League Start an Absolution Guardian. In my prior video, I didn't really cover how to League Start. I talked about kind of like mid-league issues and endgame issues, and that video was more of like an endgame showcase and an actual video on how to start the character. In addition to that, and I screwed up with this, all of the PoBs that I had were PoBs that you could follow like mid-league, but they weren't really good, League Start PoBs. They weren't proper League Start PoBs. And, that's on me. I wasn't trying to create clickbait or anything like that. It was just, I hadn't played for a couple of months and I built this character, at the very beginning of 3.17. And so I was just trying to get some PoBs out there to kind of conceptualize the build. But I've updated them. I think these are kind of proper League Start PoBs that I have now, and I'll go over them right now. And I'll also kind of talk about my strategies in going through the campaign and league starting. So the first thing is, let's just start with the level 56 milestone that I have for the league start. And I have a bunch of like rare items on here. These are just basically fillers. Fit anything in here. Really what you're looking for are intelligence-based items that have the sockets and colors that you need. Colors can be, you can use chromatics to recolor equipment, but you're really looking for sockets and links. So when I'm going through the campaign, I will gladly pick up like a 4-link intelligence-based item and use that over, some other item that I have with a bunch of stats on it. Most of your skills that you'll be using are blue, okay? And this way, like if you get a 4-link, you can just use a chromatic on it and most likely get the socket colors that you need. You don't have to get life on these items. These are just rare placeholders. Honestly, oftentimes, like I'm usually most of the way through all of the acts and I'm still just, running around with normal gear as long as it has the links and colors that I need. Might be magic, whatever. The cool thing about getting rares is that, you can like run over to your crafting bench in your hideout throughout the campaign and just like slap an affix on there that you need, like, get some extra dex or like a resistance that you're short on or something like that. Okay, so let's talk about the skill pathing. Now, as a Templar and starting the game out, I like getting these skills first. I like the sustain, I like the mana regen. I don't like having to use a mana flask. I don't like worrying about my mana at all. So what I'll probably do is just go here and then grab this so I can spam more spells. And then what I'd probably do is get this so I get a bit more dex just so I can equip more items, and that extra cast speed is nice. Then what I would do is I'd probably come over here just to get some elemental resistances and that chance to freeze, which is cool. You can get this if you want, it's not as important. Now, I think going in this direction is probably the best to start off, but you can go this direction too if you want. Like, it just depends, but I'll explain why I think this is better. What I would do is I would go down here, grab this. This way you can just slap some, cheap normal shield on, some white shield on your character, and you'll get a bunch of resistances from it and a hefty chance to block as well. So that's probably the best return on investment, is going down here first, rush up here. Then what I would do, depending on how many skill points you have, but by the time you're able to buy the or get the Herald gems, then what I would do is I would try to get here and get this mana reservation and as soon as possible. This will basically let you get all of your skills online. From there, you can either go in this direction and get some more dex and some more attributes, and also fast flasks as well. If you want a little bit more damage and you want your monsters to be a little bit more tanky, your minions to be a little more tanky, you can go here. Also, this is nice to get the elemental damage leeched as energy shield, because you'll mostly be equipping intelligence-based gear through the campaign, and having some energy leech is nice. This is pretty sweet. This is also very good. Just going right here to grab this is important. So why is the chance to freeze important? Well, if you look, your 4-link freezing pulse has a 92% chance to freeze. That's pretty sweet, and it's basically like it's a freeze ray. Okay, so I really like that chance to freeze, not having to even worry about crit. Okay, so that's the idea behind this right here. So let's talk about the skills that you'll be using. You won't be using Absolution. At least I don't use Absolution to level up. I've created like a Templar racing build, if you will. This is the build that I use as a Templar to go through the campaign. I like using this build for a variety of different reasons. The first one is it makes the game kind of fun to play. This build is not really viable in maps, but it's very viable for the campaign. In fact, it's really strong for the campaign, and it's really fun to play, especially if you slap some like MTX on your heralds. I really like Herald Device. It's my favorite skill in the game. It just makes the game so much more satisfying to play. So let's kind of just go through like the workflow, if you will, on how you would play this freezing pulse build. My Guardian or Templar racing build. So the first thing is you can get freezing pulse and elemental proliferation out of the gate. Okay, that is a ton of freeze chance right there, and also all the monsters around the freezing pulse are going to get frozen down because of the elemental prolif. So it's like a freezing ray. So you basically have this freezing ray. Trinity is great. Put that in when you can get it. But, any other support that you can fit during the level up phase is fine. But these are kind of the ideal supports to use on a 4-link. Okay? Inspiration's nice when you get it too. But yeah, just these are the ideal ones. That's why I have them checked. But, if you can just get like added lightning or, added cold damage or, whatever it is, feel free to slot them in on, while leveling up if you don't have access to these skill gems. So you basically start the fight off by like throwing out a freeze pulse or two. That freezes the monsters. It gives you like, microseconds or like a second to get everything else online if it's not already dead. All right. So then what you do is you throw a purifying flame with Unleash and Trinity. And because you're using Trinity on both your freezing pulse and your purifying flame, you're doing all the damage types. And you usually got full Trinity stacks, and it's just fun to see that little like yin yang wheel or whatever it is. It's just a cool little effect to see at the top of the screen. And Trinity is really, if you can support it, it's really one of the most powerful support skills in the game. So sock it in. And so, anyways, you freeze stuff. You throw out a purifying flame that will basically kill all the monsters. If there's a boss monster or if like there's a monster that survives, that means where you threw that unleashed purifying flame, that might be like 3 of them that went out at once, there's a big consecrated ground circle, okay? And then what you do is if like the boss or the rare monster or whatever is still alive, you throw out a decoy totem in the consecrated ground. So the consecrated ground is then healing the decoy totem, and the monsters are usually wailing at the decoy totem, okay? And then also what will happen is your zombies have meat shield on them, and if you're close enough to the monster that you're attacking, your zombies will basically over there and taunt. So your zombies taunt, your golem taunts, the decoy totem taunts, and it's all on consecrated ground. In terms of the auras that you're running Clarity because you want to be able to spam spells. I hate using a mana flask, so I'm just running Clarity instead of Vitality or something like that. Tempest Shield for the extra spell block. Basically, you can cap it out. And yeah, I think the setup is pretty self-explanatory. Once you kind of understand how all the skills work together. Basically, just given skill gem acquisitions as a Templar, this is just a very kind of smooth way to level up, and you can basically get all the way through the campaign as long as you have the sockets and links. Okay, and try to get some resist and attributes on your gear if they're required. But that's kind of what you're looking at there. And let's not, of course, forget heralds. This is what really makes this this build fun for me. I played through the campaign a lot, just like a lot of other people. And the issue with playing through the campaign is you get freaking bored of playing it over and over and over again. And so I like playing a build that just kind of keeps it, that I just find fun to play. Build that you really can't take to the end game, but it just makes it satisfying. It's crunchy. You're throwing out freeze and rays. You're throwing out, giant fire bombs of your purifying flame, and then you have your heralds, proccing all over the screen, and you get those satisfying Herald of Ice explosions as well, which is cool. So another great thing about being a Templar and Guardian is that you're fast, you're zoomy, okay? You're kind of like a raider. I generally like going for this first because I get always on onslaught, right? Because I have my zombies and I have my Herald of Purity, so I have 5 guys nearby me. And so you just get some extra resistances out of the gate and you zoom. Always on onslaught, so nice. Another thing I get is Harmony of Purpose. That's the next pick I get while leveling up, because you get frenzy charges, kind of like a raider, except you get power charges and endurance charges. It's really cool. And another thing that I like about Harmony of Purpose is that, in endgame when you're doing maps and stuff, there's map affixes that, enemies gain power charge or frenzy charges on hit, whatever. This nullifies that affix. So it lets you do more maps without having to worry about that affix. Not that that affix is like that big of a deal, but it just, anyways, it's nice to have something like that, a little quality of life there. I really like this skill node here. I would suggest getting it while going through the campaign. This will let you spam your flask more. It'll kind of feel like the flask of old with this. And that utility flask gain 1 charge every 3 seconds is just some really nice quality of life. So buying these skills here, eventually combined with the Brine King, will give you freeze immunity, chill immunity, and it will give you mostly shock immunity. You can get the rest of the shock immunity on your flasks. In terms of the Pantheons that I like using, and I'm not even sure if you'll be able to get these Pantheons by level 56, but I like using the Brine King to start off with. In fact, I use it for this entire character. That gives you Cannot Be Frozen, and when you combine it with this, later on in the game, you'll have essentially chill immunity as well. And then I also like going for this, Soul of Ralakesh, as my minor god, because bleeds can kill you. Also, you're going through all the trials, right? And those buzzsaws on the ground, those traps in trials, often are considered physical damage over time. And so this will make you much more tankier versus those traps. So that's why I get this. Now, generally, Aberath is better. And, once you kind of progress through, the campaign, and you don't have to worry about doing those traps. Now, when I do Uber Lab, I do run Soul of Ralakesh. But outside of Uber Lab, really, you're running Soul of Aberath. This way, you can essentially have your freeze immune, chill immune, shock immune when you have a flask up, and you're mostly ignite immune. Also, what's important with Soul of Aberath, and this is much later on in the game, not during these leveling stages that we're talking about, but Burning Ground messes you up because this character will eventually use Mind Over Matter plus Eldritch Battery. And so if you're on Burning Ground, you're constantly losing your energy shield. So I like being immune to Burning Ground. So I really, late game, this is what you're looking at. Early game, you're looking at this, okay? Okay, so let's talk about the second milestone. You want to go up in this direction to get some more spell block. Also, get up here to get another Spectre and Zombie, which is nice. Just kind of fill out everything that's close to you. That's a good return on investment. I like coming over here to get some life and some extra elemental resistance. It's kind of self-explanatory. The items are exactly the same as the first milestone, including the flasks. And like I said, I don't really care about stats that much with this build going through the campaign. You can mostly just do the entire campaign on white items or normal items. It's just about the sockets, links, and colors. Okay, so that is the second milestone. And that's kind of, you would reach this milestone once you're near the end of the campaign. Now I play a little bit slower than some people, so I'm usually around 70 something by the time I'm done with the campaign. It's not like I'm rushing through it and I finish that campaign at like level 60 or whatever. I kind of take my time with things. It takes me usually a couple days to get through the campaign. You know, so I'm not as like hardcore as like other people that like, are really into racing and getting that stuff done quick. And you know, there's probably better racing builds out there. This one is just, it really fits my play style and it's smooth, and yeah, that's the reason for it. Okay, so let's talk about the third milestone. Now this is where things change on you. By this time you should be near the end of the campaign or finish the campaign, and this is where your entire skill setup changes and your gear changes as well. Most of these uniques should be pretty easy to get. The Scourge, Grip of the Council, Corpse Walker, Darkness Enthroned, and you can get kind of a funky roomies. Those should be relatively inexpensive, and the currency that you've earned by going through the campaign, you should be able to acquire those items. Items that will be significantly difficult to get, I think, probably in the first couple of days of the league, would be the Devouring Diadem and Ashes of the Stars. Now, the good news is both of these can relatively be farmed. Now, one thing that I'm unsure of is if they're going to nerf the Ashes of the Stars drop rate. If they do, this item will be significantly harder to farm, and it will also probably be very, very expensive at the start of the league. In terms of the cost of a Devouring Diadem at the start of the league, like in the first couple of days, I've seen these things be like 2x or so. But usually within week 2 or 3, they go down to about 30 to 20 chaos. But again, you can just farm Syndicate and you can kill the Syndicate boss, and this is a drop from the Syndicate boss. So again, both of these items are target farmable, if you will. Okay. So let's talk about the rares on this. So what you're probably also going to want to spend your money on, and this is what I usually do to get me all the way into red maps, is I just spend a chunk of change on getting a corrupted 6-link. You can usually find a 6-link body armor. It won't have great stats. Generally you can find it with life and some resistances, with the socket colors that you need, and just it's already corrupted, so you know people aren't generally as interested in buying it. I just slap on some cheap corrupted 6-link with the colors that I need. That's what I do, and that will basically power this character all the way into red maps. Now these rings, you want to make sure you get dex, and you want to make sure you get enough resistances on them, because if you don't get enough resistances on them, here, let's take off endurance charges. And you unspec some of these skill points, like down here, you will be negative. You will be under the resistance cap. So now you can also get budget versions of these items and do upgrades later on. Getting these resistances on this jewelry isn't as important, but later on you really want to shoot for these resistance tiers. Shield, this is kind of an ideal shield that you want to get as well. And again, that's kind of the minimum resistance tiers that you're looking at right there. Now the skills, what you're going to want to do is, if you get a Devouring Diadem, this can be your skill setup. Now, if you don't have a Devouring Diadem, and I don't think a lot of people are going to have one by level 72 unless they start in mid-league and they get like an X drop or something during the campaign, they can just buy everything with that. But if you're starting out, what you'll do is you'll not use Zealotry, and instead you'll use Clarity, and just kind of find a sweet spot in terms of mana unreserved and your mana regen as well. Okay, whatever that is. And that's how you can kind of make this build work without using an Ashes of the Stars. So the next thing is we'll talk about your Spectre and Animate Guardian links. This is what you're looking at generally to start. This way your Spectres and your Animate Guardian are kind of tanky. Elemental Army on your Spectre and Animate Guardian is so great. In fact, in my opinion, it makes your Spectres and your Guardian more tanky than Meat Shield. And later on in the game, what I'll be doing is you'll be using an Awakened Minion gem just to get the +1 level to raise Spectre, because you are not a Necromancer and you don't get like, +2 to all minion levels. You don't get that sweet quality of life. So you have to figure out ways to get your raised Spectre gem high enough to get 4 Spectres out. Okay, so that's the plan. And to do that, you really need to get an Awakened Minion gem, basically. But that's something that you'd be doing mid-league, okay? Or like week 2 or something like that. Okay, it shouldn't be that difficult to fully blue color the Scourge, but this is what you want. You want your zombies and your golem with feeding frenzy. In a 4-link, you'll have Arcanist Brand, casting Assassin's Mark, Purifying Flame, and Bone Offering in that order. The quality of life from those different skills combined is great, and they really make this character work quite well. And again, having monsters on Consecrated Ground from the Purifying Flame is very helpful, or having your minions on Consecrated Ground, because they'll heal much faster. In your body armor, you'll be running Absolution. Again, your body armor is that corrupted 6-link with the colors that you need. And these are generally the best supports to use. Now note that increased critical damage support isn't going to provide as much return on investment until you can get your crit up. I don't yet have Brittle Ground Boots equipped on the Animate Guardian at this stage, but once you get Brittle Ground Boots equipped on your Animated Guardian, and they're about, I don't know how much they'll be at League Start, but mid-league they're about, 20C or something like that, then you'll get a really good return from your increased critical damage. It'd be like 50% return, but right now it's lower. And feel free to play around with different skill gems as well. Even if you don't have these exact colors, like you don't have to use Hypothermia, you can use something else. And mix and match basically. So in one of your 3 links, you'll have Molten Shell, Increased Duration, and Vol Summon Skeletons. The tankiness of this build really requires Molten Shell. I mean, you're still tanky without it once you ramp everything up. But Molten Shell is going to save your butt all the time. And I really like it lasting a long time. Once you get this build fully online with all the items, like you have a really long Molten Shell, because it has 2 duration supports on it. So it lasts like, 7-8 seconds or something, maybe longer. And then your Vol's Summon Skeletons are going to last a while too, because of increased duration. Now, Summon Skeletons, like, they do some damage, right? Like 40 of them at most combined under perfect circumstances will do almost 1 million with this item setup right now. But really the reason for the Summon Skeletons is that they're sitting there taunting their bodies to get in the way. And it's useful to have, and it is extra damage as well. But it's mostly just really a way to throw bodies at monsters. And I prefer that over like Vol Haste or something like that. I do not use Vol Molten Shell on this build, because I like all the souls going to Vol Summon Skeletons. And also, you only have so many keys on your hotbar, and just regular Molten Shell is great. So that's what I run. In terms of what you're going to run in your unsets, I would suggest Convocation. Now, in your other unset ring, you're going to have a movement skill. It doesn't have to be Frostblink. For this character build, I like using Frostblink. Also, dropping Chilled Ground is really cool, and there's some benefits to that as well. But run whatever fits your play style. Frostblink for me on this build fits my play style. So a couple of things, because you're running Corpse Walker boots, you don't have to really worry about corpses on the ground for your offering to work. And you can use other offerings as well. I'm using Bone Offering because it does increase cast speed a lot, especially with the Ashes of the Stars. And it's a good way to, just keep your minions alive. But, you can mix and match. You can try different offerings. If you want to go fast, probably Flesh Offering is the way to go. Okay, so let's talk about the fourth milestone. The fourth milestone is going to look very similar to the third milestone. It's really just about skill progression. Also, in terms of additional items added, I'm really just adding some jewels. Now, these jewels usually got a premium, at least ones where you have flat life and then minions deal increased damage if you used a minion skill recently. In my experience, usually minions have a chance to taunt. They're pretty cheap, and I also think they're one of the best affixes to have, and so you might be able to get them at a bargain. Elemental resistance is also useful until you can run the Wombo combo with the Queen's Hunger to keep most of your offerings up at once. So, for example, if you have Spirit Offering up, that's a really great way to max out the resistance of your minions. But until then, honestly, it might be more useful to just get some minion resistance as opposed to extra damage, and they'll be a lot cheaper as well. I also like in the Darkness Enthroned belt, I like Hinder and Taunt. Get some extra resistance in there. Your damage is fine, so you don't need to worry about trying to get these expensive jewels. You can get these jewels later with the increased damage. Again, all the items besides what I just talked about are the same. The skill setup is the same. By this time at level 87, you will most likely actually be able to get a Devouring Diadem and an Ashes of the Stars. So you can actually run all of the auras in this setup at League Start. Another thing that I want to talk about is the Animate Guardian. So the only item that I have on the Animate Guardian, the custom modifiers, is the Dying Breath. It's like a staff that has this effect. If Impulses and Gravebinds are cost effective at League Start, and your Animate Guardian isn't dying, then I would strongly suggest getting these two items. That'll help you out a lot with clear. Now, something I'm not sure of because I've never tested it out is, instead of running a Leer cast and the Victario's kicks, I'm thinking of running the Gull and the Duskbite boots. They're pretty cheap, and if Gravebind will actually trigger their effects, that's going to be so cool. So that's kind of a fun way to have kind of a procking Animate Guardian walking around with a Gravebind and all these different things. I'm not sure if it's going to work out. If it doesn't work out, then just run some more mundane uniques on your Animated Guardian. If you want to know how to gear out your Animated Guardian, look up Gazzy on YouTube, GHAZZY. Most everyone knows about him. He's really big into minion builds, and I'm sure he has many great tutorials on Animated Guardians. Okay, so that's the fourth milestone. Nothing else really to talk about. You're just basically getting skill points. Items are exactly the same. This would be your fourth ascendancy, Bastion of Hope. And by this time, considering that Uber Lab is done, I don't have to worry about trials and stuff like that. I'm running Soul of Aberrath and really try to get it upgraded to be unaffected by Burning Ground, because that will help this build out a lot. Because again, you are using Mind Over Matter, and Devouring Diadem gives you Eldritch Battery, so you don't have to worry about pathing over here right away. Now the great thing about Devouring Diadem is that the proc on this, trigger Feast of Flesh every 5 seconds, that'll full heal your energy shield. It's really baller. So this gives you a bunch of tankiness. All right, so let's talk about the fifth milestone, and really this is still more about getting skill points. I'm just kind of showing where you want to go with this. You want to kind of get over here to get that energy leech, because at this point by level 93, you're going to want to get rid of your Devouring Diadem in place of a fancy hat. This is just kind of a generic fancy hat. It's not like a super fancy hat. It's not a god hat, but this has, you know, if you follow my other video in terms of how to craft one of these, this is something that's very doable to get by fossil crafting on these hats. And you could probably make something like this for, I'll say, probably less than 7x. I'm just kind of spitballing it here. But this will last you for the entire game, really. And then, of course, you know, because you're crushing most of the game content, you can get more currency and get even a fancier hat. So that's kind of, those are just kind of targets to go for. Again, that's not yet on the build yet. What you're going to do, and we'll just go over the next milestone here, is you're going to skip your big first investment is going to be beyond, you know, the Diadem and the Ashes of the Stars. You know, if you weren't able to farm them yourself, is getting a fancy hat. You'll be making your first X is going to be going to making a fancy hat. Beyond that, you know, the more currency that you get will be going to getting a wand like this. You do not need trigger cast on this build, so hopefully that means you can get a wand that will be cheaper in price compared to a trigger cast wand. But this is where your money is really going. Another thing that your money can go to that's a good return on investment is, I was talking about brittle ground boots. Okay, so with those brittle ground boots, you'll notice that your no, it's not. Oh, I guess it's switched up. But it's in my hat now, right? I thought I was looking at the prior milestone. But you'll notice that increased critical damage, like, see, that's 43% now as opposed to like 20 or whatever it was before. Now, depending on the supports in the fancy hat, you know, you'll be mixing and matching different skill gems up there. If you get some good rolls with socketed gems gain like deal 30% more elemental damage, then what I would suggest doing is, and everything else is great about the helm, just the math will work out well. So maybe you'd run like physical to lightning instead of something else. Now, in terms of spell echo, awakened spell echo is really great, especially when you get to trying to scale damage late, like at the very, very end when you're like trying to farm high delirious maps and stuff like that. That's when you're going to look into really pushing your DPS, and you need awakened spell echo for that. But really, for most of this character's life, I would suggest investing in an anomalous spell echo. So beyond the fancy hat and the wand, what else is different about this milestone? And this is once you finally reach over in this area. You have about 95 skill points or so. All right, now, because you're investing money in getting a fancy hat, and after the fancy hat, a wand, you'll just be using this Scourge up until that point. Don't bother with 6-linking your body armor. You don't need to. Because remember, your Absolution is now going in your fancy hat, right? So that means you can just run with a 5-link in your body armor, which is really nice. That'll save you currency. So the money that you save from not worrying about getting a 6-link, you could just dump straight into your fancy hat, and there you go. There's your 6-link. And this gives you a fancy hat out of the gate, right? Now, in terms of what I'm running in the body armor, is you want to do increased duration and efficiency support. Anomalous is great because it gives you increased skill duration. That's very important. So these will be affecting the offerings that are in the Queen's Hunger body armor. And of course, you know, your Molten Shell is going to last a really, really long time, and your Vol Summon Skeletons are going to last a really, really long time. Your Convocation's also going to last a while as well. And the Frostblink, again, doesn't need to be on a 6-link. If you get a 6-link, fine, that's great. You know, the chilled ground will last longer on Frostblink, but it's really unnecessary. Also, once you get the Queen's Hunger, that's when you change your belt up as well. You want to put the Leash of Ablation on to get the Wombo combo. And this way you can get all of the offerings in the config tab over here. I'm still considering that this guy by 95 is using a Dying Breath. Do not have a do not have a Kingmaker on the Animate Guardian yet, don't have the Crown of Tyrant on, again, all your money should be going to making yourself a hat. And then after that, it's a wand. I did spend some money on some boots here, but that, flat 5% crit chance is nice. And only do this if you're really comfortable with your Animate Guardian and you feel like it's not dying at all, okay? But what I have done here is I have uncommented out. I've made live Flesh Offering and Bone Offering to affect the PoB. I think it's fair that usually this character has 2 offerings up at once. So I do have that factored. Be mindful about uncommenting Spirit Offering, because that will mess with your resistance breakpoints. So like, this will give you a bad idea of what your actual resistances are. So keep those commented out if you want to, check resistance levels, etc. And it's pretty rare to have 3 up at once. If you do have a increased duration support on an offering enchantment, like Bone Offering, that's really, I think, the best one to have as the enchantment, then you will have 3 offerings up more than not. But it's 2's the average, so I'm just putting 2 in the config tab. And of course, feel free, to see what your damage is with or without these modifiers. Comment them out. Okay. Also, in terms of the specters, at this point, another thing that you'll be spending money on, and this should be probably relatively inexpensive by the time you get to level 95, is I was talking about earlier the awakened melee minion damage support gems. So, for example, you're running this thing now, and you can run Meat Shield if you want, if you can't afford this yet. But as soon as you have enough money, feel free to make some investments and awaken in one of these gems here, so you can get that +1 to your raised Spectre, and that will let you have 5 Spectres out, which is very, very nice. Or sorry, 4 Spectres out. Okay, and that's the point there. And those 4 Spectres will be helpful. Now, the Spectres that I have that are considered to be running at this point in time would be an Arena Master, a Baronite Cleric, and 1 Host Chieftain, 1 Carnage Chieftain. Now, if you don't, the next best setup I would suggest would be Host Chieftain, or sorry, 2 Host Chieftains, 1 Carnage Chieftain, and a Baronite Cleric. I think the Arena Master is kind of overrated, unless you can figure out a way to really stack the duration of minion skills somehow on an Arena Master. And then, of course, what's just also very consistent is just 2 Host Chieftains, 2 Carnage Chieftains. That would probably mean that, at the beginning of the fight, you're doing more damage. You have faster ramp up. But like that Baronite Cleric, all the monsters in that little Baronite Cleric aura circle, like that's like out the gate. It's constant. It's on all the time. It's nice. So I would, again, a good setup: 1 Baronite, 2 hosts. Why hosts? Because crit is actually really, really nice, especially with once you start scaling crit multi, and also when your monsters crit, they freeze. Okay, one of the reasons why you're running cold in this build, so your minions can freeze monsters, and crit will help your minions freeze. Okay. Well, you notice again the entire setup has changed. You're no longer using offering in your Arcanist brand. You're using Hydrosphere instead. Hydrosphere is really great. I'm not going to go into all the reasons why, but I like it. You can put other things there if you want. Now, also what I'm doing with this Milestone 6 is I'm buying specific alternate type skill gems like Anomalous and Divergent here that aren't usually super expensive, like Awakened Spell Echo. Some of these might be like 50 Chaos or an X or whatever. It just really depends. But Like this makes a big difference, right? Compared to your default. So after you get your fancy hat and you get a good wand, then I would say your next investment should be like the alternative skill gems or like an awakened minion damage support gem. So you get that +1 level to your specters. That's what you're looking at. But I'm not including any super expensive gems in here yet, like awakened spell echo. Okay. This is what you can have in a hat. And the best setup, the best supports depend on what innate supports are also in the hat. So you might have to use different supports. Like I said, you're probably going to be running precision. You might want to run vitality instead. Depending if you get a Watcher's Eye. Like if you get a Watcher's Eye that can benefit from precision, then that's great. If you get a Watcher's Eye that benefits from vitality, then don't run precision. You don't really need it because you have some accuracy for minions in your tree already. And Defiance Banner in one of your rings as well. Now, these have changed since the campaign, your flasks. You basically want shock effect reduction, increased armor, and I'd probably say cast speed on your sulfur. Or, whatever comment, whatever. Just try to get this affixed to these on the 3 different utility flasks, these 3 different affixes. I like a bleed immune flask. You are corrupted blood immune. But that's different than a bleed, and bleed can still fuck you up. And this is important. It's just as important as getting a fancy hat and a wand is a forbidden flame and forbidden flesh jewel. Getting Pious Path on this character is really important, and it seems like this build's going to fly under the radar again for a league. And so you probably should be able to buy those Pious Path jewels at a bargain compared to other Forbidden Flesh and Forbidden Flame jewels this league. But the issue is because you're no longer using the Diadem, you no longer get that full ES heal every 5 seconds. And the Diadem really makes you tanky. You don't have the benefit of that anymore with a fancy hat. And so you really need a way to regen your energy shield. And so after the fancy hat, and of course getting like a 5-link Queen's Hunger, and that goes along with a Leash of Ablation, but these are like very, very cheap items. Your next expenditure should be in these 2 items here, okay? Now here's a caveat for this build. Maybe there'll be like a build and these are gonna explode in price, I don't know. But like you could probably buy 2 of these last league for under an X for both, for a pair, all right? I don't know what the pricing on these things are going to be. Again, these are very nice for this build. That's one of the reasons why this build is probably better as a trade league build, because if you're really trying to push damage beyond a Diadem, and you can really push easily 15 mil with a Diadem, but if you want to make it go higher than 15 mil, you're really looking at getting a fancy hat, okay? And to have nice survivability with running this specific setup with Eldritch Battery and Mind Over Matter, you're looking at getting Pious Path, okay? And if you don't get Pious Path, it'll still work fine. Like you have great block and you have energy leech and things like that. The problem is that just during specific clutch moments, you're gonna find that you're without energy shield and you can't cast spells, and you're like, oh shit. So it's not fun to be in that situation, and Pious Path will essentially prevent you from being in that situation. Just make sure you're on consecrated ground. So those are the upgrades. Those are your first big expenditures. After that, what I would suggest in terms of upgrading the character is just compare this PoB, the Milestone 6 with a fancy hat, versus my level 100 Gucci-fied character export from the Arch Nemesis League, and just try to work towards certain targets in that build. The least important of all those targets is the cluster jewels out here. Okay, those are the least important of everything in that build. So get those cluster jewels last if they're expensive. But everything else, like try to work for items and gear equivalent to that. And that should treat you right. And this is already kind of close, okay? Oh yeah, And then after, another big thing is once you're sure your Animate Guardian isn't dying, okay, and you're comfortable with taking your Animate Guardian versus Elder or the Feared or whatever, and avoiding certain types of super attacks that may, you're so tough with this character and the different offerings that rarely is your Animate Guardian, like my Animate Guardian has never gone insta-gibbed, but like there could be several things hitting your Animate Guardian once with this, combined with like a boss super attack that can kill it. Like I have had my Animate Guardian die twice last week, and both the times was basically doing Elder or Uber Elder. So let's see. But also good investments once you're sure Animate Guardian isn't dying is like a Kingmaker. That thing is great, okay? And definitely get a Kingmaker with 4 Cluster Jewels, for reals. Also, another thing that's really important is getting a Crown of the Tyrants as well. And at this point, kind of refer to my other video that kind of talks about like endgame progression and it's like an endgame showcase of this build. So I think that's it, guys. If you have any questions, like feel free to post them on the YouTube. I don't have much of a following, so like everyone who posts a question, I try to answer it, and I try to be like respectful and constructive with my answers. So you know, I think this is a fun build. I had a really fun time playing it. It's a minion build that to me wasn't boring. It's kind of interactive, and it's very, very strong. And it can scale easily over, well, not easily, but it can scale past 50 million damage without being an aura stacker. And at that point, like the performance of this build, once you reach all those end game stages versus the cost of the items versus like, you know, you compare the PoB of this versus like a high-end Skelly Necro or something, it's a lot, this build ends up being a lot cheaper, and in my opinion at least, and you do more damage based off the cost of the items. So that's another cool thing about the Absolution Guardian. All right, guys, take care, and hopefully you enjoyed the video.